Welcome back. Many have compared the G20 Summit to the Bretton Woods meeting that shaped the global economic world order as we know it today. Back in 1944, towards the end of the Second World War, more than 40 countries met in the US to create a new international monetary system. It took 2 years to prepare the conference and many more until the agreements came into effect, but then they contributed to the exceptional economic growth after World War II. Bretton Woods created the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Through these institutions, it encouraged free trade and open markets, assuming that more economic cooperation might prevent violent conflicts among nations. The meeting also fixed currency exchange rates, taking the US dollar as the standard currency. This part of Bretton Woods, however, collapsed in the early 70s. Well, we're still joined by our guests in Riyadh, Ihsan Bouhoulega, in London, Jan Randolph, and in Washington, D.C., Kumi Naidu. Jan Randolph, if I could come back to you. Bush, during this meeting, mentioned the need to modernise the IMF and the World Bank. Is that right, or do you think it needs to be a more radical change to these organisations?
Well, I do think we are witnessing something quite historic here. There's no going back to the old way of doing things using the old institutions. I think they're up for review. Apart from the immediate focus on supporting growth, and it's important to have focus in a crisis, there is also this other talk about reforming the entire system, the system that we've lived with since the Second World War, to bring on board the G20 governments. It's an invitation to do so. Their influence and views will be expressed at various think tanks about proposals made about on the regulatory side, on the role of the IMF and so forth. But also with influence and views comes responsibility. They need to participate much more as well as express their views. And for example, the IMF, one of the child of the Bretton Woods one, there's an enhanced role for it now precisely to support countries which may be affected by the credit crunch through the withdrawal of bank credit or the flight of other investors. It does leave them short with money. We've seen Iceland, Hungary, Pakistan. You know, these countries are affected. There will be more. The IMF needs to be bolstered as this lender of last resort to support economies and to keep trade going. And there's a very important role for the IMF and World Bank for this. Its role needs to be enhanced, though.
If I could bring you in, Ihsan Bouhoulega, I mean, is needing more of a voice for some of the countries on organisations like the IMF or the World Bank? Would you agree with that?
Well, yes, but also I would subscribe to the view that what we need more radical change. You see, if it's only like giving more voice or even power to the rising economies in the World Bank and the IMF, that will not be enough. You see, what is necessary to be done in this respect, and looking at the depth and breadth of this financial crisis, is really to bring in certain institutions to help cure the very problem that caused whatever we have as a financial agony. And one of them is really to review the mandate of the International Bank of the Bank of International Settlement. There will be able to really have a deeper look at the commercial banking institutions and their movement, the movement of their resources across the globe. That will be extremely important.
Okay.
And also maybe to create an institution to look at financial services and how can that be regulated globally. See, the thing is that what you have certain economies like the United States decided to take just, you know, politically a decision by repealing the Glass-Steagall Act in 1999, and that was the beginning of many problems for the U.S. And then, due to the size of that economy, all of us now are in trouble.
Okay.
So the thing is, what you need to do, you need to overall, and then also to create some more mechanisms in order to prevent this from happening in the future.
Okay, Kumi Naidu, is that what you think that needs to happen? Is there more regulation needed? And one other thing that I wanted to raise with you is one economist suggesting today that what we need is a return to the gold standard. Do you think it has to go that far?
I think everything should be up for discussion right now. I strongly endorse the views just expressed. We also should remember that we were in this situation just over a decade ago during the Asian financial crisis. At that time, President Clinton, the leadership of the bank and IMF and so on, all said the world needs a new international financial architecture. And the reality is that there has been no movement since the Asian financial crisis in that direction. And let's be very clear, the expansion beyond the G7 dominant nations, they are coming to the rest of the countries around that table on their knees, because they are desperate now for the liquidity of those countries to actually be able to put additional money into the IMF. But the reality is we have to look at these institutions not simply dealing with the really outrageous fact that the president of the World Bank has to be an American citizen and the IMF managing director has to be a European citizen, the $1, one vote dominance system of the governance, which means rich countries dominate the decision making, and the decision making is affecting citizens all across the world. So I would say that right now what is needed is a bold, courageous approach which could potentially even lead to the redesigning of a new institution or a new set of institutions, and we should not let the current reality that we face hold back the process of developing a proper vision of how a global financial system can be democratically accountable and transparent.
Okay, Jan Randolph, just briefly, do you think that the will is there now to make those differences? We had our guest there saying that actually in the past they've made those kind of statements and not done it. Do you think it will happen this time? And what do you make of this idea of a return to the gold standard? Just I'm intrigued by your view.
I'm not into the idea of going to a gold standard. That simply empower people with gold. No, we don't need that. On the more important question about change and reform, crisis is a great reason why people start thinking in terms of reform on a much bolder level. And it's right that we do that. It's unfortunate that crisis has driven us to thinking more boldly, but it is important. And there is a role to play in terms of there is a will there. It's beginning to emerge. We'll see that come in when Obama comes in early next year. What kind of real collective will there is to reform the whole system. I think there also has to be an examination of why countries generate surpluses and others generate deficits. Financial flows are huge. They can uproot and damage economies as they withdraw. These are things we saw in the Asia crisis, and we need to look at all this.
OK, thank you very much indeed, Jan Randolph. Thank you all our guests. Jan Randolph in London, Ihsan Buhulega in Riyadh, and in Washington, D.C., Kumi Naido. Thank you very much indeed for your time. And thank you for watching this edition of Inside Story. Do send us any comments or suggestions. Email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Bye for now.